You are in the jungle. I'm Matt Edwards. We welcome Rick Broering on today, works at Local 12. You see him tweeting from there. You still do Musketeer Report, right? And you still call NKU basketball.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Is there a harder working man in Cincinnati media?
Yeah. Richard Skinner, my podcast partner. I think he's the guy who's doing even more than I am right now. So Skinny just never quits, man.
That's fair. And that's nice of you to give a nod to Skinny, who I really only know because when I interned at 12, he was filling in a lot there. And he was a great person to intern with because no BS with Skinny. If you had a question, it was quick and to the point, and it worked. Whatever he told you was good advice.
That's exactly right. He's been with me since I was 18, basically, kind of as my mentor. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
He's great people. All right, let's get right into this. I want to give you my thoughts on this, and you tell me what you think. The situation, obviously, I think everyone knows when it comes to the Bengals, the team's going to go as the offensive line goes. I think that's kind of how we feel. And there's this thing that bothers me where Jackson Carman, for whatever reason, is kind of being treated like, well, if he works out, what a treat it's going to be for this offensive line. What a luxury it'll be to have someone who you can plug in and play guard right away. And it's kind of driving me nuts. Like, he was the 46th overall pick. Like, maybe Deontay Smith should be getting that treatment. And correct me if I'm wrong, because you're more in the know and inside Cincinnati than I am. I don't live there. But it just kind of, shouldn't we expect him to make a bit of an impact right away rather than treat it as a luxury pick that maybe, let's hope it works out? He was 46th overall.
Well, that's exactly right. And not only was he 46th overall, but he was the explanation for why they didn't need to take Penei Sewell or one of the other Rashawn Slater, one of the other top offensive linemen with their first pick. I mean, coming into this offseason, everyone agreed there was no way not to after you saw the way Joe Burrow's season ended last year. That offensive line had to be upgraded and had to be the biggest priority. You have to protect your franchise quarterback and the investment you're going to make into that guy going forward. And so the idea that, okay, we don't need to take a first round offensive lineman because we're going to take one in the second round. And that guy is Jackson Carman. And now we're talking about he's a third stringer. And, if he's able to offer us something this year, that'd be great. Wait, what? You said he was going to compete from day one for a starting job. And that was the reason you didn't need a first round offensive lineman. So I think you're exactly right. The narrative has shifted so quickly. And while I think there are a lot of positive signs from the first preseason game and some of the things we've seen in camp, from an overall perspective with the Bengals, that offensive line situation and Jackson Carman, to me, seems like a major blunder so far from what we've seen and heard.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that worries me is, and unfortunately, we've had to deal with it too much, they're one injury on the offensive line away from being in trouble. And, there's nothing I'd rather be wrong about, but Jonah Williams is going to be the candidate that comes to mind when you think of who's someone to get hurt. So they don't really have the luxury of hoping a second rounder works out. And again, it's just one of those things where, like, that's at the core of my argument here is how quickly we kind of went from Joe Burrow writhing in pain in Washington to not even a full year later of just being, well, like, let's hope this works out. Like, we can't keep giving them a pass. And again, going into last season, we knew the offensive line was a problem. And again, all of a sudden, people just kind of have, and I'm really going at fans here, and I'm not going at them in a mean way, but it's like, we need to hold the Bengals accountable for the things they do to protect number 9.
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in the narrative that they were selling us, which I'll admit, I was at a certain point, I became okay with the idea of, all right, you get a Jamar Chase, you've got this explosive receiver that can help Joe Burrow get the ball out quicker. He gives them another downfield threat, so it's not as easy to pack the box and bring safeties down in on blitzes and things of that nature. Like, there were logical reasons and ways to talk yourself through the Bengals' plan of attack with the draft in this offseason. And I agreed with it in some respects, or at least I was able to talk myself into it to some extent. But you're absolutely right. If you say, if the end result was that second round pick is going to be a total bust or not going to be able to help you at all this year, then the plan was not a very good one. Like, it may work out in some shape or fashion. It may not be the total disaster that we thought it was coming out of last season to not significantly upgrade that offensive line. And you can talk about Riley Reif and what he'll mean. Like, I think him and Jonah Williams at least look fairly solid right now, and that gives me some hope. But you're absolutely right. If Jackson Carman is just going to be an afterthought for this season, then the plan this offseason and with the draft was a bad one.
Yeah, and I just going back to the tackles you mentioned there, I'm happy with the offensive line the way it is. I just worry one injury and you're in bad shape. And I guess my overall point with Jackson Carman, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I don't even know if we're one injury away. Like, do we know? We don't know who the starting guards are going to be. We're still talking about whether it's Michael Jordan or Suafilo at one of the guard spots. And it's like, if that's the answer, that's not any better than where you were at last year. Michael Jordan is the one who got us in that situation with Joe Burrow in the first place. So I don't even know if you need an injury to get to the point where we're saying, man, we're still in big, big trouble with this offensive line. Yeah,
we could be. Everyone's obviously excited to have Frank Pollock back, but he's a coach, not a magician. We can differ on that. I'm happy with where the offensive line's at, but an injury away. I just want the standard to be, you draft a guy 46th overall, he better be able to come in there and play. He doesn't have to be a Pro Bowler. He should be if you're taking him top 50 in a few years, but you got to get guys when you have positions in need. You don't have luxury picks anymore in Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's perfectly said.
I just want the bar raised, Rick. Is that too much to ask?
No, I think you, like you said, you've got to hold them accountable and demand it, especially after what we've seen out of this franchise over the last few years. I mean, when you start as poorly to a new head coaching area as you have with Zach Taylor, you want to see change and you want to see him start to get things right, especially with the draft. And again, there's no need to rehash it multiple times, but the whole plan of attack this year was sold on the idea that you were going to get a guy to protect Joe Burrow with that second round pick. And it was going to be an instant impact type of guy.
We will see how it goes. Time will tell. Only one preseason game down. We'll go to the defensive side of the ball. I don't know if I would consider this a hot take, as they say in the sports radio business. I won't be absolutely heartbroken if the Bengals don't re-sign Jessie Bates. Like, as long as they spend that money elsewhere. And look, I want them to re-sign Jessie Bates. Like, I'll give you the argument for both sides for me. On one hand, he's great. I've been saying, I probably said it on this podcast, I've said it for a long time, I've wanted the Bengals to have a Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed, someone who can be a ball hawk back there. And whether or not he's a Hall of Fame level guy like those guys, time will tell. But he's certainly as close as the Bengals have had in a very long time. In my lifetime, I think so. My question is, could that money be better off spent somewhere else? And the argument for that would be the potential of this pass rush. They gave the money to Trey Hendrickson. They gave the money to Sam Hubbard, which I thought was a great deal. DJ Reader, Joseph Osai looks really good. I think if you've got an A-grade offensive line, that makes a C-plus safety into a B-plus safety, and I think that's something to consider. So maybe they use that money elsewhere and still get maybe not the same production, but similar production. I just think we're going too far with re-sign Jessie Bates no matter what.
Well, also, I think the timing of all this matters. Like, if you were going to try to if you were trying to go to be the first to the safety market and sign Jessie Bates before any of the other top safeties signed a deal this offseason, and you felt like you were going to get him at a discount and less than what you would once some of these other guys start getting their contracts, then by all means, I could have seen you trying to be proactive and do so. But now that we're to the point where we've already seen a couple of big safety contracts come out and we know what that number is, which it's significant, and Jessie Bates isn't going to take much less. Are we sold that Jessie Bates is an impact guy like the names you were mentioning? I mean, I don't think he's a Troy Polamalu or Ed Reed type of guy. I think he's one of the better safeties in the league right now, but he's also really only proven that for one season. I'm much more on the idea you've waited this long. Let's see how it plays out a little bit this year. What if he takes a step back? What if he just becomes, one of a clear starter in this league, but just a decent guy, a mid-level guy in the NFL? Are you going to feel good that you paid him all that money off of last year's production? I don't think so. So I'm with you. Why are we in a rush right now to spend all this money on Jessie Bates? Yes, he looks great, but safety is a position that really isn't very high on the list of positions that you value in football. I mean, I'm kind of of the belief that you can put a lot of different guys back there and get similar production unless they are a true playmaker and difference maker, sort of like the names that you brought up. So if you don't have one of those types of guys, I'm not big on spending a ton of money on a safety, especially before he's really proven himself. And as good as Jessie Bates was last year, I'm not convinced that he's a top 5 safety in the NFL. So I wouldn't be ready to spend that type of money yet at all.
Yeah, I would disagree with you there. I do think he's in the top 5. Now, do I sit down and watch Justin Simmons Broncos game tape? No. But yeah, I think I'm glad we're on the same page with that. Like, if they don't re-sign him, especially if they spend that money elsewhere, and I'm a big believer in the trenches, that's fine. I'd like to see them re-sign him, but don't go, don't do that at the expense of other positions, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't know if you plan on bringing up the pass rush more, but that was a great point that you're talking about. All of a sudden, to me, aside from the offensive line last year, the biggest weakness of this team was the fact that they couldn't get to the quarterback at all. They ranked dead last in the NFL with just 17 sacks. There was a game where they didn't touch the quarterback for an entire game, which is inexcusable with the amount of dropbacks we have in the NFL at this point and the amount everybody passes. You get to pin your ears back and go right after that guy pretty much at this point. To not even touch a quarterback for an entire game, almost impossible to have happen. So they were so bad last year that I think my biggest takeaway from the first preseason game was the way Joseph Asai looked, the way that Darius Hodge looked as an undrafted free agent. I think the Washington game coming up here on Friday is going to be massive for him, especially since Asai is not going to play. He'll probably get a few more snaps. I'm with you that you don't necessarily have a huge contract coming up with those guys this year necessarily, but I'd be much more apt to look at what I can do up front with some of those pass rushers and see who I think are going to be the best of that bunch and lock those in as quickly as I can. Because if you can get a legitimate pass rush going, and I think you might have found at least one steal in draft with Asai, maybe more if Darius Hodge lives up to the billing as well. All of a sudden, you could have a couple guys on the cheap that you can lock in early and really have a dynamic pass rush going forward. And in my opinion, from a defensive perspective, that's the most important aspect to have is a pass rush.
1,000%. And I've gone over it at length on past episodes. You go back and look at the teams who make the Super Bowl, who win the Super Bowl. They're good offensive lines and they're good defensive lines, and that's what's important. Speaking of Bengals pass rushers, I know you were out and about. Did you see Carl Lawson just got carted off at Jets practice?
Yeah, I actually saw Skinny had retweeted that just after we finished our podcast a little bit ago. And I was already of the belief that the Bengals made the right decision moving on from him. I thought Hendrickson was a very solid replacement, and the guys that they drafted, I was really high on. Obviously, an injury can happen at any time. That's part of the game. But now you see this, it's like you really have to feel good about the way the Bengals went about that in the offseason and handling those edge rushers.
Right. And who knows if it would have happened in Cincinnati as well. But I mean, he's had 2 ACL tears. Hopefully it's nothing. It sounds like Ian Rappaport's saying it's actually an Achilles injury, which is never good either. But hope the best for Carl. It's kind of one of those situations where, like, get your money, dude. I'm all about that. I'll never fault a guy for getting the most money he can get. But right there, that's why you do it. And that's why Jessie Bates right now has every reason to be out there kind of, if he wants to. And he didn't by any means go over the line by saying what he said last week when I believe he said, apparently I haven't done enough to prove I'm one of the best safeties in the league. That's fine. Get your money, man. I'm all fine with that. Sometimes it can go over the top. Don't do setups in your driveway like T.O. did at one point. I guess do it if you want to. This is America. Do what you want. But I'm good with guys getting their money, and hopefully it's something minor for Carl. So let's go along here. Finally, I want to get into, as far as the Bengals stuff goes, Washington, the football, do they have a name? I've seen a list of names, and then they had 3 names, and then the GM said no. Do you know? What's the latest, Rick?
No, I think they're still throwing around some finalist names, but honestly, do they need to change from football team? Like, as goofy as it was when it first came out, and as much as everyone ridiculed them or already hated them because of their past name and everything, so they weren't going to like to begin with, we're to the point where I think it's very normal. Like, it does not feel weird to say at all. It doesn't trip me up when I hear other people say it on the radio or on TV. Like, I'm fine with Washington football team. Can they just leave it that? I think that works.
I'm good with that too. Whether or not that happens, I just feel like haven't they hired a firm now? So they've got to come in there and make themselves. But I do think football team was on that final 8.
Yeah, I mean, I would keep it. Plus, it makes their logo look like some weird blog or something. Like, it reminds me of Pro Football Talk when I see the WFT Washington football team. It just reminds me of like PFT or something. I don't know. I like it. It's got a weird feel to it, and I'm used to it now.
Well, that's we both got our vote. I'm good with that. I don't really care what they do, but here's what I'm looking for out of them when they play the Bengals, or what I'm looking for out of the Bengals. First thing, I've got three things. How that offensive line holds up against Washington. We just talk about defensive line. We know what a monster Chase Young is. That whole defensive line's really good. He's obviously the headliner. We saw what they did last week against Tampa. Wasn't bad. Let's see what they can do against probably a top 5 line. And then the second thing, too sloppy with the football, less fumbles I want to see this Friday. Let's start there. Both of those two things. The offensive line, less fumbles. Rick, what are you looking for tomorrow night?
Yeah, well, the offensive line thing, I think, is a big one because of that pass rush that you're going to face. I mean, that whole defensive front, Montez Sweat, Jared, I like they are loaded. You said they're top 5. Like, if you want to tell me they're the best in all of football, I wouldn't have a problem with that because they've got 4 difference makers on their defensive front. And I think they've got like 6 guys that could all start for most teams in the NFL if you're talking about their defensive tackles and defensive ends. So
Deron Payne's the one I was trying to think of. I couldn't think of.
He's awesome.
Monster.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like they are, other than like the Rams, I don't know if anyone has a front line that scares me more than Washington's if I was an opposing offensive lineman. So it's going to be a really good test. Who knows how many snaps all those guys, the starters, will play. But either way, they've got some depth there. They're really talented up front. So it'll be a great test for the offensive line. I'm kind of getting interested in the running back situation. Like, obviously, we know Joe Mixon is going to be the guy that everything runs through this year. But Samaje Perine's probably going to be that number 2 just because he's proven he's been a good special teamer. But all of a sudden, like, they've got a couple. Chris Evans, the 6th-round pick out of Michigan, was very interesting as that Gio Bernard replacement. I think he can really make some plays out of the backfield as a pass catcher, as long as he can block. We don't know that yet. We'll still have to see that. But there's a couple of the other guys that they gave a chance to last week where I think there's going to be a battle for those last few spots in the running back room. So I'll have an eye on that for sure. But the biggest thing for me, I go back to Darius Hodge. Like, we saw what he did. Most of it was against at least second stringers, if not third stringers last week. He's going to get more snaps. He's going to get them earlier in the game. If he can make some more plays, if he splashes again, you have to think he's earned his way onto this football team.
Rick, with the Darius Hodge fan club, I like it.
I'm all in. I mean, how could you not be excited by what you saw in an undrafted guy who got that much pressure on the quarterback, showed that type of explosion, and he's a guy who they didn't really know what he was. He played in a 3-point stance a lot in college. The Bengals took him thinking he was a linebacker. They're using him as an edge rusher now, but standing up as a defensive end. He's playing in a way he's really never played before in his career. A lot of people think he wasn't used properly. He looks like a diamond in the rough. And again, it's one preseason game against backups, but if he does it again against some starters or second string guys that are pretty solid for Washington, I'll be impressed. And I think he'll have earned his way onto the team.
Yeah, it'd be cool to see a Marshall Thundering Herd guy making an impact as well in the NFL. I don't know. I mentioned this on Twitter. I'll keep this brief because it's not important. I had to rewatch most of the second half last Friday night or Saturday night because my neighbor's yard, which I know this is audio, but about 20 feet away from me, some drunk dude passed out and was just screaming obscenities at the top of his lungs for literally an hour. So I had to keep an eye on that during the second half. I mean, there's nothing that ever goes on by my house. And then there's a preseason game I've been waiting for a month, and this dude shows up.
Well, I will say you made the right decision to watch the drunken guy outside in your front yard because, one, it's a more rare occurrence. You're not going to get to see that very often. And two, it's a preseason game. Like, we're in here trying to drill down and analyze all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it was a preseason game. I mean, I was smoking a cigar at Blaze Lounge in Newport and half paid attention to the second half as well. I had to go back and rewatch a lot of it. So I get where you're coming from.
Well, that I got to stick to my guns. Last week, that's what I was all about. I love the preseason. Because I think you do too. Guys like Darius Hodge, who you want to see what they can become. I mean, that's a lot of fun to me. And then the other thing, this is a nerdy thing too. I mentioned the Bengals potentially having something similar to Ed Reed. I think the next thing I'm going to say is more realistic. Do the Bengals nearly have their own version of Justin Tucker? I'm pretty jacked for Evan McPherson. We've been tortured with kickers my whole lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing. Bengals fans have been so tortured with that kicker position that it does excite fans when they see a high draft pick kicker come in and look like McPherson. I never care about kickers until they screw up when it matters, right? Like, I feel like kickers are like refs. A good one you should never notice. The problem is we keep noticing the Bengals kickers when we need to rely on them and they should be, in the clutch. So I'll wait until he's making clutch kicks before I start praising Evan McPherson. But I get your point. He's looked very good.
I love it. We can move on from those Shane Graham and Mike Nugent heartbreak episodes. All right, Rick, you ready for some rapid fire?
Let's do it.
I call this rapid fire. You can answer as short or as long as you want. All right, starting off here, let's get after it. Better shot at their respective playoffs, the Bengals or the UC football team? I think this is a good question, by the way.
Wow, that's a really good question. Because UC has to go undefeated with wins at Indiana, at Notre Dame to even have a chance. And even if they do all that, I still believe it. Like, I know logically there's no way you can keep them out because they're already top 10 in the country, but I still believe like the committee will find a way to screw them over and not put them in because that's just how college football works. The Bengals, I would be thrilled with like a 7-10 season out of them. It's hard for me to imagine them being in the playoffs, especially in this division. I'll say UC has the better chance.
I'm with you. I'm with you all the way. I think UC, if they go undefeated and don't get in, I will raise absolute hell. As far as the Bengals go, I've been saying all along, I just want them to go into December with a shot to win a wild card. Even if it means they need to go undefeated in December and 7 other teams need to lose every game, I just want them to get into December with the potential to make a wild card. That's all I want this year. Second question, have you ever cried during or following a sporting event?
Oh, yeah. I mean, ones I played in for sure. As a fan.
Okay, I guess I wasn't thinking of it that way because I cried after we lost 2 high school football games my senior year. I was speaking as a fan, though.
Yeah, as a fan, I know I did when I was younger for sure, like as a kid. I don't think there's been any adult moments where I've been like invested. And like nothing after 16, I don't think. But definitely when I was younger, I had some moments.
Okay, that's fair. Least favorite thing about Jed DeMuesy?
Oh, I've got a list. Where do you want to start? But I think the most aggravating thing about Jed is his pretentiousness about the shorts on airplane thing. It makes absolutely zero sense. Jed DeMuesy is the most like normal salt of the earth beer drinking guy, which is why I like him. Normal dude. And then you start talking about clothing on airplanes and the guy becomes like a 1960s socialite or something. And he's elite and wants to wear fedoras and 3-piece suits on airplanes. I have no idea what his issue is, but he's a very, very weird human who I am happy to know.
I got to disagree with you there. I am anti-shorts on airplanes. Have you ever sat next to someone with short, like if you both have shorts on, it's an issue. So no one can wear shorts. You don't want your leg skin because like if you're sitting in basic economy or whatever, I don't want to be ruffling up against some old man's legs.
I don't understand what you guys do on airplanes. This has never remotely been an issue for me. I've never once thought about my legs touching the person next to me. Like I'm not man-spreading on them.
Oh, you got a man spread.
I don't know. I don't understand it. People's legs aren't really, I mean, you're in a public place. There are way worse things than someone's legs touching.
Totally.
Yeah.
I've had, I went off on this podcast last year. I think it was when I flew back from Florida. There was a family with bags of like deli meat, just passing them around and just eating loudly. And they were, oh boy, did it drive me up a wall.
Yeah, okay. That's a terrorist move. I'm not, that's, yeah. That's totally different.
Yes, that is much worse. All right. So once we're done with this podcast, you've been told that you will be killed tonight. The killer, however, is granting you one last meal in the greater Cincinnati area. Where are you going?
Ooh. Wow. In Cincinnati, I'm probably going to Rio Grande in Newport for some Mexican.
Okay.
Probably more like Tex-Mex, I guess you would call it. But yeah.
I can get down with some Tex-Mex. All right. Let's say they're closed. Where are you going?
Maybe I would take my fiance over to O'Brien's in Newport, get some wings. That's where we were engaged at. It's kind of a special spot to us, but they also have very good food. So,
okay. So first choice, Rio Grande, but if they're closed, you'll involve the fiance a little bit.
Yeah. Like, well, that was our spot. If it was Rio, I can go. It could be like death row situation. I'll be like, bring the Rio in, but like, if it's not an option, then we'll make sure we just take her to O'Brien's.
That's nice of you. Who should be the next host of Jeopardy?
Oh, LeVar Burton.
Okay. I thought Joe Buck did a nice job too. I didn't see LeVar. I did. I don't remember. I don't really care. But the guy
I don't like Jeopardy, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Whoever. Oh, I love Jeopardy. I watch it all the time. But it seems like the guy who was supposed to take it over is catching a lot of heat. He might. Maybe should just stayed in the control room.
He seems problematic.
Yes, he does. Our boy Jed had a good tweet about him. Very accurate earlier. Or no, he retweeted someone who basically saying he's just another. I mean, could you go any more generic than that dude? I mean, he literally could be on an airplane brochure. Just, I mean, who wins the Super Bowl this year, Rick?
Kansas City.
Okay. Chiefs got it on record. And finally, you can punch any one athlete square in the face. Who is it?
Wow. Damn, that's a question I've never thought of before. What athlete do I genuinely dislike? Here's the problem. Most of the guys that I think I dislike that I would want to punch in the face are guys that I want no part in punching in the face and having the possibility that might punch me back. If you told me like I get to punch Vontaze Burfict in the face, but he'll never know it happened and like he can't come after me, then that's who I would probably choose. But I'm not punching Vontaze Burfict in the face with like the potential that he could come back after me. That seems like a terrible life decision. So
yeah, I guess in this scenario, he cannot come back after you.
Okay, then yeah, Vontaze Burfict is the worst human I've ever been around as an athlete for sure.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
I don't know that I need too much. I think it's most of the things that people have seen. He was terrible to women inside the clubhouse, inside the locker room when, they were around. Just a kind of a despicable guy all around from what I could gather.
Totally agree. Glad I always say, who do I say? I guess right now I say Hines Ward. But at the same time, you bring up a good point. I was always thinking at it from a sports perspective as to where you are a better person than me and think beyond the field.
Well, I think, I have a hard time really getting like mad at guys just because they were on a different sports team than the one I rooted for. Like, I'm not real into the, like, I really hate this other athlete thing just for no reason. But there are guys that like, you've had to deal with from a media perspective. And like when they suck as a human, then it's like, all right, yeah, that guy, I don't like that guy very much.
Yeah, that's fair. See, my only year in Cincinnati, Vontaze was hurt. That was the game. I think he missed the first 10 games of the year they started 8-0. But I've told the story on here before. I am aware of some of the things you were talking about. And he also, I had never talked to him before and came up to me one point while I was talking to AJ Hawk off camera about podcast, ironically. And Vontaze Burfict, his locker was right beside him. And he literally said in my ear, "No one wants to talk to you." I was like, dude, I don't even know you. And clearly the guy I'm talking to, like, we're having a non-football conversation. Yeah, he's a strange cat. So
nobody wants to talk to you is kind of a great line, though.
And he might have been actually, right.
That's one of the better things he's probably said to a reporter, for being honest.
Yes, you're not wrong about that. All right, Rick, tell everyone where they can find your work and really anything you want to say here.
Well, thanks for having me on. Twitter is probably the best place to find me, at Rick Broering, just my name. At Musketeer Report, you can find all my Xavier stuff. We've just been publishing all types of off-season content as they get ready to take practice on. And then I do the Skinny podcast at Local 12 with Richard Skinner, who, for my money, is the most knowledgeable sports guy in the business around here. You can ask him about literally anything, and he knows exactly what's going on and has a take on it. So he's very fun to do a podcast with.
And that includes like 7th grade basketball.
7th grade freshman boys basketball, Northern Kentucky, volleyball this weekend. He's going to be broadcasting high school boys volleyball, I believe. So he's a man of many talents and much knowledge.
All right, Rick, appreciate it. Go check all that stuff out. I listen to the podcast. It's awesome. I enjoy it. You guys are the best. Thanks for coming on. It's In the Jungle. If you like it, subscribe, give it a rating, tell a friend, whatever you want to do. Thanks, Rick. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.